Okay, so I would invite you to come onto your belly. You can relax your feet and then bring your hands. So grab your biceps with each hand and then bring your forehead onto your arms. So your chest is just very slightly elevated up off of the ground. And then just begin to settle in your body. Find comfort. Let your cells begin to migrate downward towards the pull of gravity in the earth. And from here, just begin to notice your breath without any need to adapt or alter it. Just start to become completely aware of the different parts of your breath in your body. And then bring your attention particularly to your diaphragm. So the diaphragm, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a visualization as you're bringing your attention to what's happening in your diaphragm at this moment. So the diaphragm is double domed. It kind of has two umbrella type shapes that come up into the left and the right side of the inside of your ribs. The diaphragm attaches on the front to the xiphoid process, which is the little nub at the very bottom of your sternum. And then it connects to the inside of the lower edge of the rib cage, all the way around to the back, where it connects to your thoracic vertebra 12 and your 12th rib. So maybe just trace that line that I just described, starting in the front at your xiphoid process and going in one direction or the other, and just tracing along the ribs, the sides of the body, to the 12th rib that's a floating rib only attached to your spine. And then to your 12th thoracic vertebra. And noticing that from here, from this edge or line around where the diaphragm connects to your bones or your structure, a very muscular frame goes inward towards the center, connecting to the musculotendinous central tendon which rides in the middle of the diaphragm. Just take a few moments to really feel into this. And even if you can't feel it, remember the fake it until you make it. So bring the visualization into your mind of this membrane that is not dividing the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity, but rather creating a landscape. It's both creating and following the landscape of the organs in your body. And as you're noticing, notice if you have a tendency to breathe more into your chest so that the chest is expanding and contracting quite a bit. Or if you have more of a tendency to breathe into your belly, where the belly is expanding and contracting more. And no matter which of those it is, I'd invite you to start feeling the central tendon, so the center of the diaphragm, going downward towards your belly on the inhalation, so that the lower edge of your ribs and your belly are what is expanding with your inhalation. And here on your belly is a great place to feel into this movement, beginning to really delve into what's called diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is focused on the central tendon and the thoracic diaphragm actually doing the movement, and so to say the work, rather than the muscles in your ribs, your intercostal muscles. This movement is also extremely beneficial to your heart. They claim that since the heart is actually directly connected to the diaphragm, every time you breathe, the heart takes a ride downward. And when you exhale, there is a suction movement that's being created by this movement, and that's helping with the venous blood return. So the heart actually doesn't have to work quite so hard. And when you're breathing in the diaphragm, you're massaging all of your internal organs with each breath. take 2 more breaths here into your diaphragm. And then whenever it feels good, I would invite you to roll over onto your back. Maybe keeping your knees bent if that feels good. Or if you would like a little bit more comfort under you, you could put a pillow underneath your knees. And I'm going to invite you to bring one hand to the lower part of your rib cage, so just below the xiphoid process, and one hand onto your chest. And just start by allowing your cells to migrate downward towards the pole of gravity. Feeling your back in contact with the earth. Allowing your body to settle into that contact, that gentle pull of gravity that we're often not aware of it acting on the mass of our body. And begin once again to trace the diaphragm, noticing a little bit more particularly here the back part of the diaphragm. It seems to be easy to focus the breath on the front body and feeling the expansion and condensation of our chest or belly or lungs on the front side of the body. See if you can notice the 3D nature of the diaphragm, connecting to the 12th floating rib and your 12th thoracic vertebra. And once again, just bring your attention to noticing if you have a tendency to breathe more into your chest, and the chest expands and condenses a lot with each breath, or if you have a tendency to breathe more into your belly, and where exactly you can feel the breath, the prana, your life force, flowing into and making contact with parts of your body. Notice if there's a rhythm to this movement. Is it fast or slow? superficial or deep. Diaphragmatic breathing, if you cultivate this and practice this a couple of times every day, can really enhance your overall well-being, as well as your capacity to go more deeply into other practices of pranayama or breath work. This is one of the foundational breaths for yogic breathing. So take 2 to 3 more diaphragmatic breaths here, bringing all of your focus into feeling the diaphragm moving down towards your pelvis with your inhalation, and then resting back upward, nestling up into your thoracic cavity, right beneath the lungs and the heart. And if you're practicing this on your own, at some point, it may be helpful to add counting so that you make the inhalation to a count of 8 or 10 or whatever feels good for you. And then you make the exhalation that same number, creating a fluid and gentle rhythm of the inhale and exhale. Taking all the time that you need now, I'd invite you to roll over onto one side, maybe supporting your head with one arm. And just take a moment for your cells to move down towards gravity on this side. Seeing if you can focus on and notice where the diaphragm is connected to the ribs on this side of your body. Feel the movement when you inhale. Do your ribs on this side of the body press a little bit more into the earth? And then very slowly taking all the time that you need, press your hand into the earth, and I'm going to invite you to come all the way up and find your yoga ball and come to sit on a yoga ball. So, and anatomically, at least my understanding at some point in the past was kind of that the diaphragm is a horizontal membrane. So if you imagine horizontal, right, it would imagine it as being flat. However, that doesn't really capture, so the diaphragm really, it's like two bubbles that come up here in this part of the body. And as I said earlier, the way I see it is that it both creates and follows the internal landscape of your body, right? So on your left side, your heart is just above the diaphragm, and it does connect directly, the pericardium connects directly into the diaphragm. And then beneath it, you have all of these amazing digestive organs, right? You have your duodenum, you have your liver, you have your gallbladder, you have stomach, spleen, pancreas, kidney. So that's all around the very bottom of the diaphragm. And so every time that you do diaphragmatic breathing, you're actually stimulating and slightly massaging those internal organs. So I'm going to invite you to just maybe it would be helpful to keep your hands here, wherever, on the sides or in the front or in the back, and just notice the landscape. I won't even say the horizontal nature, but the landscape of the diaphragm, and how it to some degree is creating a boundary between the digestive organs that are beneath it and the respiratory organs or circulatory system organs that are above it. And as you're breathing, and again, if you tap into the diaphragmatic breathing and feel your diaphragm, maybe notice how when it comes down, it does actually flatten out a little bit. It never becomes like flat, but when you exhale, it becomes actually quite rounded, let's say. And then when you inhale, it flattens out just a little bit. So the central tendon kind of comes down, whereas the borders or the sides, like around here, go outward and to the sides a little bit. So maybe you can do that a couple of times with your hands. So feeling, this is about how the diaphragm is upon your exhalation when it's completely relaxed. And then when you inhale, the central tendon kind of comes down a little bit, and the sides or the borders expand out to the sides. And then it balloons back up with the exhalation and relaxation. So just notice if you can feel that in your own body for a few moments. And then if it feels good, I would invite you to begin just very subtle movements, originating those movements from the diaphragm, either keeping your hands on your body or releasing them onto your legs. And just one of the best ways to really bring cellular consciousness into a part of the body is to originate movement from that part of the body. So just see if now that you've created a little bit of a relationship with the diaphragm, if your diaphragm wants to move a little bit, is there any way it wants to express itself? This is a not forcing and not holding back. So just allowing the movements to arise without having expectations of what those movements are going to look like. Find the juiciness in the movements and just, oh, yes, diaphragm, there you are. You're so delicious. Oh. And then if it feels good, you might even want to sound from the diaphragm. That's another great way to open cellular consciousness in the body, is to allow sounds to originate from the part of your body that you're attuning to. Ooh. 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 Way, yeah, way, way, yeah, way, way, way. And then if at some point it feels good to come into stillness, allow the full expression that wants to be had there of movement and sound to come to completion. If you feel ready to come back to stillness, just notice what you notice. Get curious about the messages that your body is constantly giving you. Is there an area of the diaphragm that you still don't feel connected to? That's perfect and that's okay. It's just a noticing. And now imagine, so use your imagination for a moment to imagine that your diaphragm is like the part of the earth that we can see. So the top part of the diaphragm that faces up towards the lungs and the heart is the part of the earth that we walk upon. And the part of the diaphragm that looks down towards the digestive organs is what's beneath the surface of the earth. Imagine that from the central tendon going back towards the spinal column to your T12 vertebra, there are two roots and two branches. So arising from the very center of the diaphragm, there are two roots, two what's called crura, a left crura and a right crura, that go back to your spine. Mine are starting to move already before I even was focused on that. But so they go to T12 and then they gently go downward along the front of the spine. So the bodies of your vertebra, in the front of them, they have the anterior longitudinal ligament that runs vertically from the tip of your tail up to the foramen magnum of your skull. And these two crura, the two roots that are going to your thoracic 12 spine, are going to then follow downward in front of this anterior longitudinal ligament, all the way down, down to the tip of your tail or the coccyx. So just see if there's any movement that may want to come from that, or maybe you want to still be still for a few more moments. The movement happening from my crura right now is a forward and back movement, kind of like a mermaid type of movement, but that may not be the way that your crura, your roots want to move at this moment. There may be parts along this trajectory that seem cloudy or that you really can't feel into, and that's totally perfect. Maybe you even want to start from the other end and notice the crura at the tip of the tail. If you squeeze your anal sphincter muscles, you may notice that those also have a connection to the crura. So the crura are muscle. They are muscle fibers that go all the way down. And so they actually can help to move our skeletal structure. They can move our tail. They can move our sacrum. They can help, really, they're very deep muscles that can help with our capacity to move with ease in our bodies without so much effort in our abdominal muscles. And then maybe you want to try a little bit of side to side movement, noticing how if you move from side to side with the lower body, maybe originating from the tail, maybe originating from the sacrum, maybe from where the diaphragm is, that one crura, your left or your right crura, is extending in this movement, and the other crura may be slightly shortening. It's an exploration. See if there's any noticing or awareness in your body from this movement side to side. Oh, there it was. Mine just kind of came online. I was doing the side to side movement more mechanically for a moment, just because I wanted to feel the side to side movement. And then all of a sudden, I could feel the crura, for lack of a better way of describing it, kind of come online. Like all of a sudden, they activated, and I was like, oh, there you are. Maybe come back into stillness whenever that feels good. Again, allow any continued movements that want to happen, just allow them to continue. Notice if anything feels different. Come back to your diaphragm. Come back to your diaphragmatic breathing. Now with this new root structure here, that the crura are actually a part of the diaphragm. Notice if when you're breathing diaphragmatically now, if it feels any different now that you know and have awakened these two roots. And then if at some point you feel excited about one more exploration, bring your attention now to the branches, the crura, the superior crura that go again, they come from the central tendon. They are muscle fibers that start at your thoracic 12 vertebra, and then they climb upwards towards the light like the branches of a tree, a left and a right crura, and they also run along the front of your anterior longitudinal ligament all the way up to your foramen magnum, which is the hole in your skull where your central nervous system passes through. I was tapping into that this morning. It was a somewhat foreign structure to me at the beginning, but then I got curious. I was like, okay, well, what? Yeah, yeah, that's helpful. My inquiry was like, okay, well, maybe feeling the foramen magnum partially has to do with me tapping into and bringing into my awareness what passes through there. So it's the hole is only like this big in the foramen magnum, and your central spinal cord passes through that, and your other ligaments connect from there. So see if you can move from the crura that start at your T12 and your diaphragm, these branches. Do they want to move and express themselves in some way? And again, sometimes it's helpful to just start moving with the imagination or the visualization that they're moving you. And then maybe at some point, the origination really will come from the crura and will be activated there. With this time with me and my body is wanting to first start to move the diaphragm again, the main part of the diaphragm, and then maybe from that the crura part, the superior crura part will, yeah, now I start to feel the crura that's going upward in moving the more horizontal part of the diaphragm. And maybe as you're moving the superior crura, notice if there's any mind or energetic to the crura in general that may become apparent to you. Again, without forcing it, just holding it as an inquiry, kind of what the energetic is of this. We have this surface, and then from that, we have two branches and we have two roots that are growing upward and growing downward. I have a lot of inquiries or theories myself, but I'd like you to maybe posit some questions of wonderment or some questions of inquiry that may or may not be answered, but that just get curious about what the energetic of or what the background of these two roots and two branches may be. Maybe it's also helpful to do a little bit of sounding. Crura, crura, crura. I even find sometimes with anatomical structures that saying their name as I'm tapping into them, saying their name and sounding it out loud helps to activate it more. It's like something in my body knows that they're there and where they are, and that tends to sometimes help me tap into that. Crura, 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 crura. Oh, yeah, there they are. They just took on a life of their own. Beautiful. Maybe move more of the body if you want to actually like move the whole body now and just experiment, notice, like maybe you want to stay on the yoga ball, maybe you don't. Notice how activating these structures informs the way that you move in your body. This is a great way to integrate after you have done some sort of somatic exploration. Just allow your body to move freely so that you can really feel what that structure is and how it informs your overall movement in your body. I'm just going to keep doing what you're doing. I'm just going to share one more exploration that has been helpful for me. You may or may not want to try this at this moment if it feels like too much. I've been coming into Sphinx pose, so just with the forearms flat on the ground, elbows under my shoulders. And I find that here, so since the crura are along, so if this is my spine, the crura are along the front of the bodies, I've found that it's when I'm on my stomach and lying this way, it's easier somehow for me to tap into them. And so what I would invite is to just try looking from side to side. And noticing, so just bringing your focus to the very front of your spine and seeing if you can feel an activation from the tip of your tail all the way up the front of the spine to your cranium, maybe moving even the sides of the body. Maybe pushing up and down, even like just the try, like coming up into upward dog, but using the muscles of the crura rather than pushing into the earth, actually feeling how the crura can lift you and extend. So rather than, I just noticed I was squeezing my glute muscles a lot. So rather than squeezing the glutes or the legs or pressing into the earth, just noticing if you can lift yourself through the crura. And for me, it's like an extension back towards the tail and up towards the head at the same time, just focusing on the front of the spine. And then just take a couple of moments to do whatever you need to do, free movement, sounding, being still, whatever your body wants to do to kind of integrate all of that exploration. Have fun exploring. Thank you.